Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5. So let's get right on into it. Last week I predicted that number 1 would be Night Swim, number 2 would be Wonka, number 3 would be Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, number 4 would be Migration, and number 5 would be The Color Purple. And I only got 2 out of 5 of my predictions right for this weekend. I kind of figured that Night Swim was either going to be number 1, maybe number 2. I didn't really think it would be any lower, so I kind of already knew that was going to be, conflicting, but I didn't really expect the number 5 slot to mess me up. That's kind of where I kind of went wrong here, and a lot of you also kind of went wrong with that as well, because we assumed a film would have a better staying power, I guess, compared to what kind of edged over it. Not that it was by a whole lot, but we'll talk about it. Number 1 was, of course, once again, Wonka coming back here. It's actually having a really great hold. Like I kind of predicted early on, it wasn't going to be like the Aquaman where it makes $1 billion, but it's looking like it's at its Greatest Showman numbers here. It's Puss in Boots and the Last Wish numbers. Made $14 million for the domestic weekend, adding to a domestic total of $164 million. So that is $42 million away from the Johnny Depp Willy Wonka movie. It still has a little ways to go there, but worldwide, it jumped up really high. It is now sitting at $467 million. Not only is that almost at $500 million worldwide, but it is now $8 million behind the Johnny Depp Willy Wonka film, meaning it is so much closer to outgrossing it there in every territory as opposed to just the domestic numbers, which is what I've just talked about. And that is just, for this movie, that is so goddamn impressive. It still needs to get to, I believe, $600 million in order to quadruple the budget, but, I mean, shit, it's already at $500 million, which I think is already a pretty impressive number, you know what I mean? That's pretty damn good, and I've already kind of talked a lot about how I kind of saw this could potentially be an outcome for this movie early on, and that's great for it, and I enjoyed the film, and I'm glad people are enjoying it too, so, yeah, it just all around good news for Wonka. And then number 2, we got Night Swim, which had a pretty modest opening. It didn't get number 1, but it got sort of close. It made $11 million for the 3-day weekend. That's on a budget of $15 million. So as long as it gets past $30 million, you can consider that a success, since it's doubling its initial production budget that is listed. Worldwide, it is sitting at $17 million right now. So it only needs $13 million worldwide, so that's everywhere, just to slip by its doubling point, and perhaps they'll get that. I don't think this will drop off so, greatly. I know the response has kind of been just kind of, this is definitely not the Blumhouse Atomic Monster Mithrigan of last year, even though this is, Blumhouse and James Wan's production company, same people who did Mithrigan, not the same director or writer, I should point out, but, I'm sure they were maybe banking on the same kind of success, and it's not really that, this is definitely, just from concept alone, I think they were really banking on killer pool idea, and it's gotten them far enough, but I think you need that meme factor that Mithrigan had, that this doesn't really have when you see the film, you know what I mean? And even in the marketing, it's not like a creature from the pool is doing a funny dance, or, there's anything like that. So, there's a lot of like expected territory when you see the film as well. I've seen it, not a big fan. So when you see the movie, I think word just really started to spread, like it's nothing really all that new. So either way, I think it'll still probably slip by that initial doubling point. But I think if the Atomic Monster and Blumhouse collaborations are going to try to match Mithrigan, outside of making Mithrigan 2, I think they're going to have to really analyze. It's not just picking a horror short and being like, well, that can be a movie, obviously, or anything like that. Like, they really have to analyze not just what made Mithrigan work, what just makes these movies in general work, what catches on with the people these days, what are people looking for in their horror films, what is something they're not expecting that you think could really work. And I don't think Night Swim really was the correct gamble here, but, growing pains, this is their second collaboration since their announced merger. Yeah, I think Mithrigan was the first, and then they're like, yeah, we're going to keep doing this for select films. So yeah, we'll see. Number 3 was Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, making $10.6 million, adding to a domestic total of $100 million. So there you go. For Aquaman, getting $100 million domestically. It has outgrossed Birds of Prey by $16 million, and it now needs $8 million until it outgrosses The Flash. Obviously, we're going to get there. For James Wan domestically, it is $17 million over Insidious Chapter 2, now needs only $2 million until it outgrosses The Conjuring 2, which is obviously really fantastic. For James Wan, it's going to be one of his highest grossing films for the DC universe. And that obviously continues with our worldwide numbers. Now that it is sitting at 336 million worldwide, it has outgrossed The Flash by 70 million and now needs 27 million until the first Shazam. And then for James Wan, it has outgrossed The Conjuring 2 by 26 million and The Conjuring 1 by 20 million. But now, and that's just for James Wan's filmography, but now it is right behind for James Wan, the first Aquaman, so it needs 807 million in order to outgross that. So this is the highest it's going to be, you know. James Wan's top 3 highest grossing films worldwide are Furious 7, Aquaman, and now Aquaman 2 technically, but not on the same level as those other two. So congrats to James Wan at the very least. You know, like I was just talking about, you know, he's got a collaboration with Blumhouse. He's doing horror stuff. I think he said recently he's ready to go back into his horror filmmaking, you know, from with him in the director's chair, not just producing. So, you know, maybe we'll get another Malignant or a Malignant type, you know. We'll see. Anyways, let's move on to number 4, which is Migration, making 9.9 million, adding to a domestic total of 77 million. It needs 31 million until it outgrosses Hop, and then worldwide it is sitting at 152 million, so it's still behind Hop there, this time by 36 million, but importantly, it has doubled its $72 million budget by... It's outgrossed it by 8 million now, that doubling point. So I'm not sure if they will be able to slip by the tripling point because they've been able to rebound this last week. But I'm not sure as the weeks are now going to go by if that same kind of momentum is going to carry over. You know what I mean? This is a new year of some new movies, and I think this could be the start of the slowdown here. People are back in school. It's no longer holiday break. So either way, you know, they were able to at least double their budget, which... fine enough. If they can outgross Hop while it's still here, you know, then they're all good. But right now it's kind of like, maybe, you know, and that's not usually where Illumination is at, you know. I know this is kind of a weird time for it to be a release, sort of, because Wonka's doing better than expected. Aquaman, even though that isn't, you know, performing to the standards of the first Aquaman, it's still making a lot of money, a lot more than Migration. So I don't know, man. And I think just also in general, like with Illumination, it's like Despicable Me or Sing, I guess, or the Super Mario Bros. Movies now, and now it's just here's a duck movie. And I think maybe some families are like, you know, we can wait for that. Maybe that's what it is. At number 5, we have Anyone But You, making 9.7 million, adding to a domestic total of 43 million. So for Will Gluck, that is 3 million over Peter Rabbit 2, and then now it needs 12 million until Friends with Benefits, his other rom-com. Worldwide, it is sitting at $58 million. So for Will Gluck, that is 18 million away from outgrossing Easy A worldwide. But for this movie, it has officially doubled its $25 million budget, and now it only needs about 17 million more that can be domestic and worldwide to get to 75 million, which would be a triple point for its initial production budget of 25 million. So that's pretty good for this movie. Obviously, when it opened up, it was kind of like, this isn't doing gangbusters, but it is kind of crowded, and now, you know, it's still in theaters. It didn't go straight to VOD right away. It's had some time to breathe, and even though the critic scores, you know, mixed, audiences have been kind of responding to it. There's some fun there, and, you know, Glenn Powell is a new up-and-coming star, so is Sydney Sweeney, so you have some fan bases there. I mean, Glenn Powell's got the Top Gun crowd, or his work got recognized because of Top Gun, or maybe in this specific case set it up, and then you have, you know, Sydney Sweeney, who, you know, Euphoria is like one of the biggest HBO shows of all time, if not the biggest. The Last of Us. Either way, you know, you have some fan bases coming in here. Obviously, it's not blowing up the box office right now, but still, it's like, okay, it's doing fine enough. Maybe we can make a case for a bigger box office success for another rom-com down the line, you know what I mean? We can get back to the golden age of cinema when rom-coms were everywhere. Number 6 is The Boys in the Boat, which I feel like tries to emulate golden age of cinema, but is not. It made 5 million this weekend, which adds to a domestic total of 33 million. So for the George Clooney filmography, that is 2 million over Leatherheads and Good Night and Good Luck. It now needs 7 million until it outgrosses the entire domestic run of The Ides of March. There is still no worldwide total for this yet, and it still has not crossed over its initial production budget of 40 million. So this is definitely another example of like a movie that isn't really connecting with other people. Like, this movie has its fans, obviously, like, people have seen it, but it's not really connecting in the way that some of these other films have, you know what I mean? Like another movie that we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about number 7, which is The Color Purple. Like I said, you know, not that it dipped down too drastically, but from where it was last week, because it opened up on Christmas Day, which is like a whole week before the weekend, it was number 1 on Christmas Day. But because it was so front-loaded with that opening day kind of like primed release, it kind of dipped off when you got to the weekend at that point, you know. It was the number 1 ticket buyer on Christmas Day, but then, you know, the people who wanted to see that already flocked to the theaters to see it. So So technically for its opening weekend, it had a, little bit of a lower debut, and now it's kind of dipped underneath the films that it was towering over for a bit. But still, it's still doing fine. It needs a worldwide total to really bump this up, because domestically it is not meeting the initial production budget of 90 to 100 million. It made 4.6 million this weekend, so now that adds to a domestic total of 54 million. So yeah, it is still a long ways to go until it doubles these budgets. And if you're just looking at a solid domestic run, it's fine, but it's one of those runs where you combine that with the worldwide intake and it can really bump up into a modest hit. And that's not really what this is, which is kind of unfortunate. Kind of a big Amblin problem lately with Steven Spielberg as the producer, and that's his company, with the West Side Story 2021 and then The Fabelmans 2022. Like, that company cannot catch a fucking break when it comes to box office hits as of late. Even Indiana Jones, which I know he didn't have like the most involvement with, since that's a Disney, James Mangold, whatever. But even that, Jesus Christ. And now moving on to number 8, which is the Ironclaw, movie that I was kind of alluding to earlier. Even though it has yet to double its 15.9 million budget, it's an A24 release. Who knows how much they put into marketing even. Maybe they're doing okay. But word is kind of spread, so it's kind of in the bottom 10 here, but it has been garnering a bit of a fan base, a little bit of attention, making 4.5 million this weekend. So now domestically it is at $24 million. Like I said, it is still a ways to go until it doubles that 15.9 budget, but it's I think word of mouth for this thing is gonna, spread on, you know what I mean? I don't think for the theater release, maybe we're at a little bit of a end here, you know what I mean? Because, we just saw the Golden Globes, the Ironclaw isn't up for anything there. Maybe there's still time for some Oscar stuff. At that point, maybe it'll get a boost, but I don't know. This might be the end of it, but I think this just in the larger scheme of things, I think this will be a movie that lives on, which I think is more important technically. Anyways, for A24's films, it has outgrossed The Whale by 7 million, The Farewell and The Green Knight by the same 7 million, sorry. And it's also outgrossed Priscilla from this year by 4 million and The Disaster Artist by 3 million. It now sits behind The Witch and Ex Machina by 1 million. So kind of going back to what I was saying before, as far as like this movie will live on, if it's outgrossing some of these other films that have already kind of had a great reputation, specifically, The Witch and Ex Machina and The Farewell, Green Knight, and that's just for A24's filmography. I think, this will be another kind of hit that, years later people go like, that was, not a lot of people saw that when it came out, but it was really damn good, and I'm glad people are looking back on it fondly now. Whether that happens to number 9 specifically, Ferrari, yet to be seen. It made 2.4 million, adding to a domestic total of 16 million, so that is 12 million away from Michael Mann's The Insider. Worldwide, it is only sitting at 25 million, so it has outgrossed Michael Mann's Black Hat by 6 million. It needs 35 million now until it outgrosses The Insider. But either way, it had a long ways to go for it to double its initial production budget of 95 million. Not only is it looking like it's going to slip out of the top 10 completely next weekend, but it is so far off from that, which, once again, I'm sure Michael Mann doesn't care about that at all, but Ferrari doesn't have what Killers of the Flower Moon had or Napoleon had, where it was like, yeah, the box office is just the cherry on top, but what Apple is looking for is streaming. This isn't that. And, I like that Neon went all in on a theatrical release for this, but I wish that they had promoted it much more. Like, this should have been like a bigger event. The fact that it opened under a mid George Clooney Boys in the Boat movie, like, that's not great, you know what I mean? I don't think their release strategy was that wise on this one, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, but oh well. And finally, closing out the video, number 10, Poor Things, which, even though it's still a ways off from doubling its lower than Ferrari's budget of 35 million, it at the very least has a lot more awards consideration going for it, and word of mouth already being spread for this season, so at the very least, it's doing its job well enough, you know what I mean? It made 1.9 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of 14 million, so it has outgrossed The Lobster domestically and The Killing of the Sacred Deer by 12 million. It now needs 20 million until it outgrosses The Favorite. Worldwide, it is sitting at 15 million, so it is 5 million over Killing of a Sacred Deer. Now needs 2 million until it gets to The Lobster. It has a long ways to go till it gets even close to The Favorite, and at that point it needs to double its $35 million budget. But still, like I said, it's the award season. It's doing its job right now. I think once we get maybe a little closer to the Oscars, they might do a bigger, wider release or something like that and really promote that it's out in theaters. Got to go see it because the Oscar noms just came out, and it was the ceremonies there, and Emma Stone's going to win Best Actress, maybe, who knows? You know, especially with the Golden Globes as well, because she took home the Best Actress in a musical or comedy there, and then that movie won Best Picture, musical or comedy, so it's a big contender now, so I think word will spread for that film now, so we might be, maybe we will see it double its $35 million budget, who fucking knows? Anyways, now it's time for the fun part, the predictions for next week's top 5. Number 1, I think, will be Mean Girls. Number 2, The Beekeeper. Number 3, The Book of Clarence. Number 4, Wonka. And number 5, Night Swim. But what are your predictions for next week's top 5? Leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.